Hello, everyone, and welcome to Shootout Podcast. I'm your host, Ross Baxter, and today is episode 23 of the series. And today's guest is a good friend and great artist. We've got Alex Jerjomin back on. How you doing, man?
Hey, man. Nice to be back.
Thanks for coming back on. It's today's going to actually be a really different sort of take on the podcast. Still, obviously, covering around student education, but it's going to be really focusing on just like the essentials, basically, and bringing up really important topics that Alex has brought up in terms of really crucial piece of advice to really help you propel your career forward. But just to give you a brief introduction about Alex, if you haven't already listened into our first episode, so if you want to go back to, I think it was episode 7, I believe, Alex. I think that was one of the, it was a while back now. It was good having you on. So yeah, like I said, so Alex works at Digital Extremes. He's worked on many amazing titles from Warframe, Spyro, Fable, and many more. And he's also an incredible teacher as well. And he's taught a lot of online courses on Pluralsight. And he's also helped me personally as well improve a lot of things, especially in my work. And workflow is actually going to be one of the main things I want to talk about with Alex today. So make sure to go give Alex a follow. As always, I'll include Alex's links in the comments below, and you'll see it on the background as you're tuning in on YouTube. So check out those, and it'll be much appreciated. As always, if you're new to the podcast, the Shootout Podcast is live on 9 other platforms alongside YouTube. We are on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and finally Stitcher. And as always, folks, the main thing I've always introduced into the podcast is you, the artist, to make sure you're including your links, your art links, in the comments section on YouTube. Just to let me share your work and get your work out there a wee bit, just so we're all helping each other. So just do that, and that'll be much appreciated. So yeah, thanks again, Alex, for coming on. Looking forward to this chat.
No problem, man. And my hay fever is all out of whack right now, so I do apologize in advance if I'll cough a little bit throughout the
It's
podcast.
Okay. Not a problem at all, man. Right, so just give it a bit of context. So we are going to be talking about kind of, I guess, two main areas, Alex. So we're going to be talking about portfolio. Obviously it could be just one main subject. Like, we're going to be talking about portfolio really in depth, and we're going to be highlighting, I guess, we will be covering games a wee bit, but it's mainly going to be about game orientated, and maybe also dwelling into a bit of other roles as well, such as concept art. But it's mainly going to be about workflow and pipeline and stuff, and just like really important advice to just propel you in the right direction. So the most cliche, but it's one that's been, I think, overlooked a wee bit. Obviously, it's a very debatable subject for, I guess, certain studios, but we'll just start off with the obvious one, Alex, which is just software.
Yeah.
So just talk about, based on your own perspective, since you've got obviously a vast amount of experience, just talk us a wee bit about your perspective on like 3ds Max and so forth.
Yeah. So, like, in the last podcast, we talked about it for 3 seconds,
Yeah.
where I said, software doesn't matter, and like, for the past like a little bit, I've been trying to like help people out, and just was looking into it a little bit more, and I realized that like when people say software doesn't matter, that means the software you use does not matter, but it doesn't mean that you should be using bad software in the first place, because it would be dragging you behind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the industry, the main biggest one, like you like to say, the biggest debate is Max Maya, right? Because everything else is kind of like standard by now. So you have the ZBrush, you have the Substance Painter. These will never go anywhere, at least for now. So these are the default. Like, there's nobody who's using Mudbox today. It's not used at all. Painter's used in games. Mari is used in VFX a lot, but even in VFX, people use Substance. So it's like it gets really confusing because a lot of people come on, and a lot of people come on from different industries and different disciplines, and they recommend the software that they use most. So when we say Maya is the industry standard software, What we mean is that most VFX studios use Maya because for VFX studios, Maya is better to use because it's easier for them to write scripts for them and it's better for their pipeline.
Definitely.
Doesn't mean that Maya is a good modeling software. And we are artists here, so most people who would be listening to this podcast would be more interested in art creation.
Hmm.
And that's where like Maya probably is the least useful for. So in video game industry, we use 3ds Max mostly because modeling is just like 3ds Max is a really bad software for anything. Animation not really good, rendering not really good, but modeling it's really good for. So like when you choose your software, you have to find the software that you think will be the best to work with and not the one that you think that everybody's using.
Hmm.
So like if you're a modeler, you have to look into 3ds Max and you have to look into Modo or Blender. You wouldn't use Maya. If you're an animator, you should look into Maya. You shouldn't look into 3ds Max because in like even like I said in game industry, people use 3ds Max mostly, but animators use Maya because 3ds Max sucks for animation. So
Yeah.
it's one of them things where you have to do extensive research before you start like developing your craft more because like a lot of people can get confused because this guy said I use Maya, that means I should use Maya.
Hmm.
It doesn't necessarily work that way. You have to first find out the person who advises you, where is he working? Is he working in the games industry? Is he working in VFX? Is he working in the commercials? And what kind of role does he have? Is he a texture artist? Is he an animator? Is he a modeler? And if he's not, if he's disciplined and he's like, if his discipline and medium does not align with yours, that means that his advice probably is not the most important one for you, kind of thing.
Because like when it
So
comes to like obviously the whole topic of I guess 3ds Max and Maya, just to give everyone a wee bit of context. So for example, the past so I've been using Maya mainly for I guess the last 5 years. But I did start off originally in 3ds Max, so that was my first like go-to software. However,
mhm.
the big reality when it came to Max being the better software was literally in the last few weeks, in which Alex has been teaching me a lot of, I guess, fundamentals in regards to workflow in terms of how to make things a lot quicker. And when it came to seeing how he worked and then looking how I worked, the biggest thing that I noticed was simply Max was making it so much. Like he was doing things so much quicker. Obviously, he's way ahead in terms of skill set and just art in general. But you could see like the tools that Max has that he was using was benefiting him far more than I was getting in Maya. And I love Maya. Like I could use Maya all day long. However, small things like obviously there's certain tools that are very similar in both software. Like they are very similar. However, there's there's so much I guess advantage to using Max that I've only realized, or I've been I guess how can I say that I've just literally noticed in the past few weeks through these discussions, through these developments of assets and stuff. So like Alex said, identify the software that's best suited for the type of part of the how can I say the pipeline that you're working on.
And I was about to say as well, it's like a lot of people, like even in say in the like even in my studio, there's like an environment artist, at least one I know that uses Maya.
Hmm.
So it's like it's not that it's impossible, but when you're starting out, especially when you're starting out, you have to choose the path of least resistance, right? So it's like, why would you use the inferior modeling software if you can use the superior, especially when you're learning and it's not too late to switch, because the more you learn of this particular software, the less enthusiasm you will have to switch later, right?
Yeah. So when it comes to like obviously like when it comes to the podcast, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. So obviously software is just going to be like a small increment of this, but at the end of the day, it's probably one of the most important parts. It's the part that defines obviously the art overall. So if you can clearly identify what you need done, then it's going to make it easier overall. And I'm not sure what it's like. Well, obviously based on all the times that we've talked to Alex, the majority of the game studios are 3ds Max at the moment. Like I don't
Yes.
recall ever in our discussions. Well, I'm not sure if there's any ones that do use Maya when it comes to like even the
There,
UK?
there are. So, for instance, Rare officially uses Maya as their default software,
Okay.
but but all the environment art team has their 3ds Maxes installed. So it's like there are even studios who would be like, oh, we are Maya based studio because everybody else uses Maya, the riggers, the animators, but the modelers would still use Max. They just would ask their bosses to get Max for their computers, kind of thing. So like software doesn't matter to the companies. The company does not care what software you know.
Mm-hmm.
Software matters to you for your own speed and for your own efficiency, right? So
For the pipeline.
and yeah, so if you're like if you're working on your portfolio, don't think like, oh, I should use this software because the industry uses this software. Think, I know that this software is far more superior for me and it will make my work that much faster, so I'm going to use this software.
Mm-hmm. And like Alex just said there, so at the end of the day, it's all based around the pipeline, and we're going to be talking about the pipeline as well. But before we talk
Yes.
about pipeline, obviously it's a good branch out, but it would be great to go straight into portfolio if that's okay.
Sure.
In
Yep.
terms of just getting a foundation of like, so in today's episode we're not just going to be talking about environment art. The good thing about Alex is that he's obviously experiencing a range of different things, and he's obviously worked in the industry for a certain amount of time in which he's been able to see how things work, and you'll be able to get his perspective from not just environment art but also like concept art, or just like a brief understanding of how things kind of work. So yeah, we'll just fire away. So based on your own
Sure.
perspective, what do you see concept artists kind of doing in terms of like what do they look for portfolios?
Right. So concept art. Right. So concept artist is the first person in the pipeline. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's either a concept artist or a designer. Sometimes you would have like we're strictly talking right now game industry, but we like because I studied VFX in school, therefore I have a brief knowledge of VFX. But don't take my word for VFX as like a holy grail. So we're gonna talk from the perspective of video games, and if I do, if I'm aware of how things done in VFX, I'll mention that as well. But so in video games, concept artist is the first person in the pipeline, right? So the concept artist designs the look, the feel, um, and the well, just basically how the art will eventually look like. So for concept artists, it doesn't really, it's not as important to know the pipeline, but it is important for a concept artist to have like a brief understanding what modeler needs, right? So really what a studio would want to see in a concept artist portfolio is just a great understanding of color theory, a great understanding of
Like
a
composition.
composition,
Yeah.
yeah, and also like it's always good to have a variety of styles. Like a great concept artist will be able to do some stylized concepts, some realistic concepts. So having like in the previous podcast we talked a little bit about
Mm-hmm.
like, is it matter for a person to have different styles? So each game would have its distinct style.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, if you know this style, you can work on that game. For concept artists, it's a little different. So a concept art, like a realistic game, can use slightly stylized ish concepts, and it wouldn't bother a 3D modeler because he understands what what I'm saying. it's
Yeah.
it's it's not as important to have the texture or like the realism in their concepts. So yeah, so I would say like for a concept artist, the most important thing is just to make sure that you have a great understanding of composition and of color, and you would have 5-6 works of levels, maybe some characters. And that's another thing. Environment artists, so 3D modelers divide into character artists and environment artists, while
Mm-hmm.
concept artists, although they sometimes do, but that's not in their title. So if being able to draw both characters and environments is a big benefit.
It's like
But
having the range.
yeah, having the range, and also being able to show that you understand the pipeline a little bit. So if you can draw orthographic views, so if you draw some props, for instance, show some orthographics, some breakdowns for the next guy in line to be a little bit easier to model from.
Perfect. Um, so obviously there's like so like the next one would be obviously based on your own experience. So what's your thoughts on, I guess, character artists?
So character artists. So it's like, how we basically talk about like, it's very confusing of what each kind of discipline needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a character artist, it's very not confusing. So a character artist just has to make some crazy good characters. Either if you want to do VFX, if you want to do games, it doesn't matter. Just keep perfecting the anatomy and keep perfecting like the design choices. So like, don't make boring, like it's like this. You only have to show your anatomy skills once, right? So you
Yeah.
make your most perfect Roman buff man, and then from their point on, it's just all about you being able to do stylized characters, or you being able to do realistic characters, and you just keep building that portfolio more and more and more. And all you need is 3 or 4 characters in your portfolio to get a job in either of the industries. But of course, if we're talking about VFX, you would probably need a lot more skill than you would in the games art. So
Mm-hmm.
character art in VFX is on steroids, because it's the characters are, if like say you make your Iron Mans, your Hulks, these are made by the most senior dudes. They're not going to be made by a junior. So you a lot of character artists jump between industries.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to get into the industry faster, I would recommend starting with games, and you can always switch to VFX. It won't be as dramatic of a change as any other discipline. But 3 or 4 characters, anatomy. That's all you have to make, in great looking characters.
I was happy that you mentioned the amount, because I think so this is always a very debatable question when it comes to, obviously it does depend on well, maybe you might have a different perspective, but like, do you know when people always say like, how many art pieces do I need? And
Yeah.
some people will say, oh, I need this amount. Other people may say, I only want like 3. Like, for example, I remember there was one studio that said to me, I'm not sure if I mentioned it to you, I won't say any names just in case.
Sure, sure.
But
Mm-hmm.
one studio said to me they wanted like 10 pieces on the same level as my train piece, and
Right.
in my head I was like, whoa, right, okay, that's a lot of artwork. And
Yeah,
then
that's very unorthodox, to be honest.
yeah, and then there's other studios that are sometimes this is the great thing as well. Sometimes it only takes one great piece to get
It
people a
is, and
job.
you're very right. And like there isn't really a number, right? There isn't like a recipe for the most perfect amount of work in your portfolio, right?
Hmm.
Like for character artists, I'd say 3 or 4 pieces is enough, but the more the merrier. But you always have to remember that you're judged on your worst piece. So if you evolved, and if you're now better, and you look at your latest character and you look at your oldest character, and your oldest character looks horrible in comparison to the newest one, just delete him. It's much better to have 3 perfect pieces than it is to have 10 and half of them to be bad.
Yeah, because like when it comes to the portfolio, like this is because this is the exact same topic I discussed in yesterday's podcast. Is so many artists on ArtStation. So well, this is like 2 sort of questions, or 2 sort of main topics. So the first one is, a lot of artists always, for some reason, like to show everything, and
Yeah.
that is the biggest no-no. Like, I'm pretty sure you'll agree in the sense that, because
I would say it's like this. It's like a lot of artists tend to overshow things.
Mhm.
So you yourself a little bit of a victim of that, I would say,
Yep.
and that is like a lot of artists want to be like, oh, I've made 20% of this train, and I'm so excited. I want to show it to the world. So you post it on ArtStation before it's even finished,
Mhm.
or like they overdo the breakdowns, overdo like you don't need to overshow things. You just show your
Exactly.
final piece, and the breakdowns are. It's like this. When you show a breakdown, it needs to be there for a reason. If you're in the games art industry, your breakdown should involve your polyframe and showing your skill of optimization, and your
Mhm.
textures and your textures and their size, because basically these are the only 2 things that like a company would care for. Nobody would care for what your base mesh looked like, or what your untextured version looked like. Well, untextured version is sometimes useful for like silhouette purposes, so if
Mhm.
it's a still good idea, but you don't have to be like, this is like my starting point, then I did this, then I did that, then I did this. It's over. Like, a when you are applying for a job, lead will look for at your portfolio for briefly 1 minute. So he needs to see as much awesome stuff as possible within the shortest amount of time, and only if he's interested in you, he'll start looking at your breakdown. So try and just focus more on final product. Make sure everything is clean and organized. Don't over post on ArtStation. Don't post work on ArtStation. There's this great part where you can post blogs. So if you want to do work in progress and things like that, just do the blog, right? Or post on Polycount. But like, your portfolio is your body of work, your final body of work. So focus on finalizing. And even in your breakdowns, like we mentioned in the previous podcast, I was saying how presentation is really important. If you can't make presentation look good, just don't post it, because you don't want to ruin your work by you know what I'm saying? So like, if you do presentation, render it nicely, just like you did with the final shots. Put nice wireframes. Don't put like purple wireframes. Put like black or white or whatever fits the color of your scheme. Render everything on high resolution, so on and so forth.
It has to be as like clean and just
clean. Yes.
Yeah, as professional as possible. Like,
it's like, when you have car designers, and then they design cars, and then they give these nice car sketches. So like, your breakdown should look like that. It's like, here's my final car, and here's all these beautiful designs I was doing while I was, you know what I'm saying? Like, only put it if you think it's beautiful.
Yeah, because when it came to so I was really happy that you brought that up, because when it came to for example, my portfolio, when I finished uni, so when I finished uni, I had, let's see, I think I had 7 pieces, and then 8 pieces, so 8 posts on ArtStation, and then now I've cut it down to 5, and I'm about to cut it down to 4. And the reason why I bring this up is because you have to be able to acknowledge, obviously, your skill set as a whole, and you have to be able to identify as honestly as possible how good is the piece. Like, you have to be able to be just 100% honest. Like, is this piece good, and how far is it from my best piece? And it's getting, like, for example, that's like a main skill as well when it comes to the industry, because at the end of the day, when you get a job, they're going to be constantly critiquing your work. So being always being able to be 100% just honest with yourself, and being like, right, I need to get rid of this straight away, then you just get rid of it. For example, like, I'm working on this asset at the moment, and I've I've remodeled it about 50 times. And I've been getting taught from Alex as well, and Alex has been teaching me it, and the amount of mistakes I've made through this process, and the amount of times I've had to restart things, but that's part of the journey, and like, you have to be able to have that. I'm not sure if it's like just like a gut feeling, but you just have to, in your head, you just have to be able to accept that you're going to be making mistakes, and there's going to be bad art as well.
Yes, and that's the thing, because it's like, as an artist, when you make things, you get attached to them, and you put so much time and effort, and it's the saddest thing to see, like, what you just made to be deleted or gone, right? But I struggled with it for a long time, because like, on my portfolio, the train piece I have, I've been trying to, like, every time I update my portfolio, I've been like color correcting it and like sharpening it, and I know it's getting to a point where that train is no longer like good enough for my portfolio. Well, for now, it's like one of the only pieces I have for realistic stuff, but like, it's sad to get rid of, but you have to treat these things as like your stepping stone, right? So it's like, this train, it may not be good anymore, but it taught you so many lessons, and if you were to make a new piece now, it will be 10 times better and much more worth being on your portfolio.
What's your since we're obviously talking about this subject, what's your thoughts on, like, say, the younger years at universities and stuff, when it comes to, because obviously they're trying to create a portfolio? Do you think they should just post anything, or should they just wait till they're actually trying to get ready for a job?
Like, it's like this, right? So your ArtStation, it's like, people from works won't be looking at your ArtStation until you apply there, unless you're already famous. So posting things on ArtStation is good always to get following, and that always increases the chances of some producer or some lead that would bump in on your ArtStation. So nothing's wrong with posting things as you go, right? So if you're just starting out and all your work is bad, but it's the only work you got, just post it. It doesn't matter, because it's not like it's not set in stone. Once you get better, you can delete it. Just make sure when you get better, you only work with what's best in your like with your top models and not
Yeah.
with your old university stuff basically.
Because like the reason why I wanted to, the reason why I asked you this is because so there's a really cool point that Alex brought up. We have a document that we're thoroughly going through for this podcast, and basically what he said was that basically when you apply for your job, your main goal is to impress the lead, and
Yes.
impress the lead artist straight away. So if you don't impress the lead artist with the artwork that you've got, like you're gonna have to wait until. So the point that Alex makes is that you have to wait until they forget you, basically.
Pretty much, yes. It's like this. When you apply for any job in the industry, be it, I would imagine VFX is similar, although I don't know. But in the games industry, it works like this. There's a pile of portfolios unreviewed, right, of applicants. So the lead would skim through them, right, and would select the ones that are like acceptable for work that he could potentially do interviews with. That pile that was not selected at this point, it's like it wouldn't be even looked upon until he goes through all of these other ones that already kind of acceptable. So that point is to this. It's like if you applying for a job and you know that you're not good enough, don't do it, because you basically, because when you apply later on, you might have to start from, you'll be in that you'll already be in that pile, and you might not have a second looking, right, at least for a while. So it's like, just be honest with yourself in that, right? So it's like if you're applying for a job in, say, on Halo, right, and you want to work in, who makes Halo these days, but not Bungie anymore, is it?
343? No, it's not.
Yeah, I think it's 343. Yeah, that's the guys. So if you know you personally cannot make an asset that looks like Halo, at least the basic ones, you're most likely will not be selected. So don't waste your time.
Because like another good topic to tailor off similar to this is the fact that a lot of people. So I actually talked about this in who is it I talked this to? I talked this with somebody, and basically what the topic was that a lot of people either apply to everywhere, or they apply to the big studios and stuff. So there's caveats for both, or like there's pros and cons, and the reason why I'm bringing this up based on the point that we just discussed is the fact that the more places you apply, that means the more risk you're. Well, I'm not sure. Would you call it a risk?
I wouldn't call it a risk, though. No. So like it's like this: when you apply, like a guy would look at your portfolio, right, and be like, oh, "Okay, you're not good enough." So you apply the second time. There's a chance that this guy might look at it again and be like, and not even recognize that this name already been up there, right? So it's always like, it's like, we will be talking about the pipeline in a minute, right? Yeah. But me and you were talking about it behind the mic for a while, and that's basically how important the knowledge of the pipeline is, and how, like, for an artist who knows the pipeline is, it's like you won't need to be as good if you know the pipeline, because if you know the pipeline, you can be useful without creating art, which is not the greatest thing, but it's still better than no job, right? But yeah, so like I think you have to have this thing inside of you, like your little personal, like, honest meter, and that personal honest meter have to say to you, I am ready for work. Or you have to look at your work and you be like, okay, I'm not there yet, I have to like level up a little bit. And when you are ready to do work, you apply everywhere. Well, apply everywhere, big at least.
Yeah, like all the main, like the AAAs,
all the main studios. Yep. And like we were talking about in the previous podcast as well, like a lot of people have this a lot of people have these fears of applying for big studios, Ubisofts, your Rockstars, your the Dice's, EA's, the biggest studios there are, and because they think these are the top of the line studios, the best of the kind, there's no way I can work on these projects, right? Reality is it's a little bit opposite. Smaller studios have very picky selection because they don't have big budgets. They have to get the best artists to produce the most amount of work per dollar paid, right? Bigger studios have huge budgets and they have huge teams. So getting into a bigger studio is much easier, but getting to actually do art in a bigger studio is a little bit harder. So it's like if you get a job in a small studio, you're guaranteed you'll be doing art. If you get a job in a bigger studio, like we're talking first jobs here, juniors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a bigger studio, there's a bigger chance you might be doing like, bug fixing, collisions and stuff like that. But it doesn't matter because getting experience is always more important than anything else.
Definitely. And at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, it's about the biggest, I think, one of the biggest flaws I guess students have. Well, not all of them. It depends on, I guess, you emotionally and just like your mindset to just approaching things. But a lot of people think, oh, I'm only going to apply to the big studios. I'm only going to apply to the smaller studios, and it's making sure that, like, obviously you want to be confident, you want to work hard, work smart and stuff. But you should never feel afraid to apply to these places. Like, give them a go, like Alex was saying. But just be ready, like be prepared, have the portfolio that we've just discussed, and make sure that you master these things. And like the main actual topic of today's, I guess, podcast is not necessarily the portfolio, but it's actually the workflow, the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the
I think
day,
we should leave that for the very end, though. But yeah.
I don't mind that. It's not a problem at all because
Mm-hmm.
we have plenty of time to talk about it. Because when it comes to obviously pipeline, there's so many different things that we can really go into depth about.
Yep.
When it comes to portfolio, so obviously I know you're not an animator. However, I also know that obviously you've worked with animators and so forth.
Yep.
Briefly, just give us a wee bit of insight about how that works in terms of the industry.
Yeah. So okay. So animator's the trickiest one there is, right? Because animation is the easiest to learn, but it's hardest to master, and everybody knows that, right? Mm-hmm. So like, everybody can just pick up the 3ds Max and move some bones around and put some keyframes, and it's an animation, right? But reality is like, studios look for like flawless execution of animation. The portfolios have to be flawless. Like, I know a lot of animators, a lot of them are my friends, and like they always kind of like, it's always been the hardest for them to pick up their first job. Mm-hmm. But once they get the job, animators really rarely sit without work. And it goes the same as for concept artists. Animators very much similar between VFX and games, and I know many animators who worked in both and transitioned pretty easily, especially today, because today both games and movies use mocap most of the time, so a lot of animators' work is fixing that up. I'm not sure how that all works, but like, that's sort of my experience so far.
I think it is really, I think you've pretty much nailed it, because based on, like, I'm literally, like, obviously I'm obsessed with VFX. Mm-hmm. Based on literally every documentary that I've watched about how they made films and stuff, or like breakdowns and stuff, it's literally tailoring towards, like you said, like the touching up of things.
Yeah, but you still, of course, like, so, and of course, when you do your portfolio for animation, the most important part is still your traditional keyframe animation, I think.
Yeah.
And it's still most important for you to create the most flawless animations there are. And I think, like, if you can get experience of mocap before you get into the job, probably is useful. Again, don't quote me on this, because I should have asked a few questions before I got to this podcast. But traditional animation is always going to be your main goal. And so software wise, use Maya, because you will never get a studio where anybody uses anything else but Maya for animation.
It's always been like, so I did I think I told you already, but I did Animation Mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And I still love animation. Like, I think animation is amazing. But literally every teacher that I had, like, literally everyone was different. So I had one from DreamWorks, one from Blue Sky, everywhere, and they were literally just always talking about Maya. It was nothing else.
Yeah, so that's not it. There's no debate on this one. There's no, like, I mean, there's probably small studios who might use Max for animation. I bet, but it's 99.9% studios will use Maya for animation. And like, for your portfolio, you want to have some shorts, some standard walk cycles, basic stuff. If you're an animator and you research this field, you would know what you need. But basically, I think the greatest thing for an animator is to, especially when he's in university, is to get on a group project and just work on short animated films or short video game reels, and just again have 4 or 5 animations in your reel, but the perfect ones. And again, once you evolve and once you're better at animation, delete the old videos, put the new ones in, and of course all your animations have to be videos. There's also some posing is great, so you can put some posing into your portfolios. And like I was saying, with although it's not the same, but like presentation is still important, and you always want your work to stand out. So research, if you're an animator, you know the software, you know Maya, you know what it is, you know how it works. Go on Gnome, go on Digital Tutors, download like, I don't know, 3-point light rendering in V-Ray or something like that. Just render your animations nicely so that it's a bit more presentable. I don't think that like lead animators would be looking at that kind of stuff, but it's still like it will take you a day or two to get like a nice renders out. So why not? And then again, it's like the more you know, the better. So if you want to be in the game industry, you have open source Unreal Engine. Learn how to transfer your animations into Unreal. Learn all these things. The more knowledge you have of the actual game industry pipeline, the better.
I think like obviously, so like presentation at the day, it's I think it's always the key one. Like you can't overlook it. Like it's because it's the thing that makes it great. Like if you have a bad, like for example on ArtStation, I know when it comes to, for example, animation, I know they're not going to really use ArtStation at all. It's mainly going to be like Vimeo or something, or like a possible reel through YouTube or something. I don't know, but like for example, to kind of reach back to like a previous topic, well, it's kind of similar, but it's like your thumbnail on ArtStation is like crucial in my eyes, in terms of trying to.
Yep.
At the end of the day, you want to create an audience, you want to create a foundation, and if you are like, when people see that thumbnail and they're not wanting to click it straight away, then you've not drawn their attention. For example, the mistakes I've made when it comes to YouTube, when it comes to the thumbnail, if I'm not making a good thumbnail, it sounds so obvious, but it has to be presentable, it has to be clean, it has to be concise. These things. It's
exactly true. It's because everybody's human, and it's on top of that, like going back into the artists field, like if you have ArtStation and it's like you're primarily modeler for VFX, right? And like maybe your job will not require you to do renders or textures or either of those, but you still want to texture and render your meshes, because if somebody's going to look at screenshots from 3ds Max, they're not going to be impressed at all, and they might just skip through your portfolio altogether.
Yep. Because like an interesting one that I only learned, and once again it was from Alex, was I think it must have been a few months ago you told me this, but it was something that kind of made me really think about how I presented things, but was knowing when to show wireframes.
Yes. So
environment art, we actually haven't touched on that, but in terms of like, because we've actually talked about the other 4 ones, but when it comes to environment,
I think we haven't actually talked environment art yet.
That's our favorite one. Why are we not talking about this?
that's what we are.
Right. Let's talk about environment art.
Yeah. So environment art is right. So first of all, big difference: environment artists in games, environment artists in VFX. Like it's a whole other game, right? The hardest to transition, because like the pipelines are very, very, very different. And like I said, I didn't work in VFX, so I wouldn't know like exactly, but I know roughly the pipeline, and I know roughly what the. So first of all, there's a modeler job in VFX. There isn't really an environment artist. So a modeler's job would be to model any props, buildings, whatever. When we're talking about breakdowns, we're like, oh, what do you want to see in your breakdown? Wireframes, blah, blah, blah. So when we talk about games art, we want to see wireframes because we want to see your skill of the pipeline, your skill of optimization for video games. Because in video games, you can only have so many polygons. So therefore, the lowest amount of polygons you use for more complicated meshes, the more advanced you are, right? So in VFX, wireframes don't really matter on things, right? They matter on characters because you have to have the proper flow for rigor to work with. But when it comes to like, props, you can have 1 gazillion polygons, you can have like 1,000 polygons, it doesn't matter. For VFX, what matters is just how things look for the camera, right? So it's like, if you're doing VFX and you're a character artist, post some wireframes, like things like cars and things that have organic flow. It's nice to show wireframes just to show that you use the least amount of n-gons while modeling it. But if you're modeling some, a building or something like that for film, it's not that important to show wireframes. There's no need for that because nobody cares. And going back to it, so this is probably like the biggest, we had like the biggest debates about environment art, and that's where I think like for you personally, this was probably so when you would have environment artists from video games giving you advice, or when you would have a VFX modeler giving you advice, you would hear completely opposite things
Yeah.
because the things are very different, and it might confuse one person, and it might make them think that people are full of shit, basically, right? Because the what required of an environment artist in the video game is as follows: you have to be able to have skills with tileable textures, you have to be able to work with making the low polygon buildings, you have to be able to model high polygon props, bake them down to low poly meshes, and put them in the game engine, right? So if you want to be an environment artist in video games, you have to have that in your portfolio. Like, so you have to create a prop, you sculpt it in ZBrush, you model it, hard surface model it, you have to then create low polygon mesh, you have to bake it down, you have to texture it, put it in an engine. Then you have to show that you're able to work with tileable textures, basically optimize the workflow, optimize pipelines. And if you go on any tutorial website, you'll find a bunch of tutorials on how to do those things, right? So it's like, so the pipeline is model high poly, model low poly, bake it down, texture it, put it in Unreal Engine, and that's your portfolio piece.
Awesome.
Now we go on to the VFX side of things. So it's a whole different game, and VFX have so much more involved, so many more people involved in this process than just a modeler, right? So you would have a compositor, a model, lighting artist, texture artist, renderer. I don't know all their specifications, but basically you would model. There are, and the pipeline is much more broken down, right? So you would model something, another guy would texture it, another guy would render it, then the guy would composite it into a shot. Personally, I think the best idea if you want to be a VFX artist is to learn that pipeline. Like, how do you go from modeling something into putting that object into a video footage, right? So you have to learn tracking, compositing. You don't have to, it's like this. It's like I'm an environment artist in video games, and ideally I should just know that part of the job, right? But I know a little bit of what everybody else does, and that way when I do my own work at home, I can sort of do it to a level where I can post something online, so I can put things in the engine, I can texture them, whatever. So the same goes for VFX. It's like, if you want to be a modeler in VFX, you should still understand how Nuke works, how Mari works, how compositing works, how lighting works, how rendering works, just so you can just so you can present something to a company. Because unless you're a character artist and you're just modeling props, I don't see a very, very junior guy getting a gig. And it's easier to get a gig if you're a compositor than it is if you're a modeler, kind of thing. So it's much more complicated, but you always have to make sure that you're taking advice from people from your industry and your discipline, because they might you might misunderstand, or you might think that guy knows the right answer for you, but he actually knows the right answer for him and not for you, kind of thing.
And I think that's when it comes to, so for example, tailoring it just to the title of the podcast, the Student Art Podcast, the biggest I think, I'm not sure the correct word is issue, is in terms of so the student education system has, I guess, their way of doing things. They have their script in terms of what they get told they have to learn, how they have to, obviously, they try to keep it up to date as much as they can. But the biggest mistake I think a lot of students are making is that they're always relying on the lecturer's advice in terms of the pipelines and stuff. However, some universities could be 5 years behind. You never know. The place I went to, I was very fortunate. However, whoever's listening to this now, you might not be as fortunate. So it's about, like Alex is saying, they're getting the right information. Because I spent about nearly 2 years trying to figure out what pipeline I needed to do to get where I wanted to go. And because there was a conflict between pipelines, I wasn't sure the type of art that I needed to create to get a job. And 2 years, to me personally, is a long time. And it's always about asking questions and asking the right questions, and just always going back to the main point of being honest and getting the honest feedback that you need. Because without
Yeah,
getting those questions answered, you're pretty much screwed, or you're going to be
I
delaying yourself for a long time.
I think that's you're exactly right, Ross. And I think it's also very important that once you like, it's like this. Everybody kind of starts like, this is 3D, and these are all the cool things you can do.
Mm-hmm.
And the first step into becoming from becoming a student to becoming a professional is to be to decide exactly what you're going to do, right? Not like, oh, I kind of like this, but also like that, and something like that, right? It's like, I want to be an environment artist in video games, or I want to be a character artist in VFX. And like, once you know your role, you learn from there, right? Because then you know exactly what YouTube videos to watch, exactly what tutorials to watch, exactly what kind of people to talk to. So it's like, decide your field first. And as far as time goes, you're very right as well. It's unfortunate, but it's like that for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
This process cannot be that efficient. So unfortunately, most people who are in the industry spend years of practicing and training before they get
Of
the
course.
first gig.
Yeah, definitely.
And like, it just that brings me to like one of the points I wanted to make as well in this podcast is this job and this industry, both the VFX, the games, the entire, like, as far as commercial art goes, this job is for an extremely dedicated people who are willing to sacrifice every single minute of their spare time
Mm-hmm.
to perfect their art. Like, once you're in, you can lay it off a little bit, and once you're in, you will have more spare time. But until you have your first job, man, you have to
Grind it out.
you have to, yeah, it's like, I know you were like that as well in
Yeah.
university and stuff, and like me too. It's like, I don't like I don't remember my like youthful life at all apart from doing 3D all the time.
Yeah,
Like, that's
we can't beat it. But
exactly.
I think the biggest, like, you'll know based on all of our discussions, but so the hardest thing when it comes to getting work done is obviously finding the right time, like, especially when you finish university and you don't have a job. And
Yes.
basically the situation is you have to get your normal job, so then you have to find the time around
That's
that
that's
to get it
yeah,
done.
that's where it gets really tough, man. And like it's really like, it's an extremely time burning process.
Oh yeah,
And like we were saying, like, when you get your first gig, things just look up from there. Like,
exactly.
then you first of all, you do work 24/7, so you learn at work, you can come home, and like, just because you got a job, of course, doesn't mean you stop working on yourself. You still
Mm-hmm.
have to improve all the time to progress in the career. But it's like if you have to have full-time job, that's fine, but like, just
Keep working at it.
just keep like, and it all comes down to passion, right? So it's like, if you don't like, if you think it's a cool job and you just feel like, oh, I just want to do it, then you're not going to be good at it, because you don't have passion for it. So you have to always, like, for me personally, it's like, when I start a project, and I like recently, because I'm a senior now. I don't really have much more to strive for apart from like managerial roles, right? But it's like, sometimes I have this thing, and it clicks. I'm like, I want to make something. You right now know I'm making that DeLorean
Oh,
piece.
it's
It's
good.
like,
I can't
yeah,
wait
and
to
it's just
see
like,
it.
I just saw it in my eyes, and I'm like, I want to make this. And now
Yeah,
this whole process of making it is just a stone in my path, and I want to see the final product right now,
yeah,
and I will not stop until I will. And it's like, if you don't have that drive and that passion, this is not the field for you. It's a field for extremely dedicated dudes and girls.
definitely. Because like for example, a lot of people ask me like how long did it take me to make the train, and a lot of people said like, Ross, how are you patient to put like the amount of hours that you did? And I was like, dude, I'm like, this is 3D. Like, this is what I'm doing. Like, I could do
It
this
is.
for ages. Like, I
Some
didn't
people,
care how long it was going to take. I was going to finish it.
like, we're right now at work working on a DLC, and like, I've been working on the same piece for over a year, right?
Wow.
And
Okay.
well, not this, like, it's like not the same prop, right? But like, in general, we're making it the same thing. So like, we're working on the same theme, and it's like, and we've been remaking things 15, 20 times, and we're not happy or whatever.
Hmm.
And it's like, if like, you have to learn to grind, and you have to learn to like ignore the time wasted and just focus on the final goal, and it's very important.
And it's that point you just said there. It's one we said earlier as well. Is the fact that you're going to have to be able to redo things. Like for
Yeah,
example, if I'm making a piece. So for example, if I'm making a piece for a long amount of time, sometimes if you almost finished it, sometimes there'll be you have to start again. It's just that because you don't own it. It's you're working
yeah.
at the end of the day for the company. It's not your
That's
project.
that brings me to a whole other subject, which we probably shouldn't talk about in this podcast,
No,
but
it's
it's
fine.
like it's the industry broken pipeline. Studios suck sometimes, stuff like that. There are some studios that like
That'll be
very efficient.
the title of the podcast.
Don't put me there. Some studios are very efficient, right? Some studios have like a great a great sort of well cogged oiled machine, and that's usually the corporate studios, your Ubisofts and stuff. Really rarely people redo things there because it's like you would not be able to get to a next step until you've got this step right, kind of thing. So it's kind of like take your time. Some studios with smaller studios, like VR game studios or mobile game studios, sometimes like your lead wouldn't look at your work until you like finished it 2 weeks ago, and then it's like, oh, redo the whole thing, and there wasn't the concept art in the first place, and it's like sometimes things are broken, but it's like totally relevant to this. But yeah, generally speaking, you will always have to redo things no matter what, especially when you're starting out. Like that's you have to be able to be like, okay, I understand, I just made some boo boo, I need to make a new one.
Right. Awesome. So we've like literally gone into like so many great topics there. Now the big one. Now
The biggest.
now the one that everything is based upon.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about pipeline, people.
The pipelines. The
Right.
pipeline.
The pipeline. So I'm not sure how we can go about this, but like so normally I think the best thing for us to do for this one is mainly talk about environment art at the moment because
I think so,
I don't
yeah.
want to mislead anybody because
Yeah, I
I'm
think like I think you're right, and it's like it's like if we're gonna talk about other fields with other
yeah,
things, we're gonna be misleading people because I might not know everything,
exactly. You don't want
and
to give anyone
you know,
wrong information.
yes. So
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 we'll talk about let's see. Like, yeah, just start off based on your own experience
yeah,
about like we'll talk about three things. We'll talk about environment art pipeline, hard surface, and organic. And we'll
yes,
talk about
okay,
how these threes work together and then
perfect.
so on.
So just to be clear, we're talking game development pipeline, and
Yep.
it's not a pipeline for any other industry. If you want a different industry, you should probably listen, do a bit more research into that. So me and Russ were, Russ and I've been talking for a while, and I've been helping him with this piece where he demonstrates his pipeline skills, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it hit me then, like I didn't realize this before, because different people learn from different points. There isn't like a start and end position where it's like you might have the most incredible artist, but he has no idea like how to make a prop for a video game, and you have artists who know exactly how to make a video game prop and they suck at art, right? So why is pipeline important? So here's what's up. If you applying for a job today, right, and you're applying for a big studio, say Ubisoft, or say I don't know, we always pick on Ubisoft for some reason.
It was the
Say
biggest one, so
Activision.
it makes sense. Or Ubisoft
Let's
Rockstar, we'll
pick
talk about them
Activision.
too.
Right. So then we pick Activision.
Activision, okay.
Yeah. So you're applying to them, guys. So you might not be an amazing artist, right? But you haven't ever had experience working in the industry in the first place. So your first job would most likely be pipeline orientated. So it won't be like you get to make props for games, although you probably will have a chance to do that, but your first job will probably be bug fixing, collision making. So if you don't know what collisions are, or what LODs are, or what like baking is, what UVs are, like things like that, you might not, you know what I mean? Like you might get a job and then you might be like, oh, what am I even doing here? What is this crap? What is a game engine? I don't understand. So let's start with hard surface. So an environment artist in a game industry pretty much always would be either making props, buildings, and they always would be whether hard surface or organic, right? So or obviously nature as well, so rocks, trees, and stuff like that. So hard surface is pretty much by number drawing with your mouse. You don't really use whack and pan as much, and it's about making super high polygon mesh with bolts and screws and every detail you can possibly put in together, and then you project that super high polygon mesh onto a low poly mesh. I'm repeating myself too much now, Ross. But yeah, so if you want to be an environment artist, you have to learn how to do hard surface. It's very important. My personal advice would be like, and that actually when I was helping Ross a lot, it actually hit me because I personally started modeling with cars, and I think it's the most beautiful way to learn hard surface. So if you're just starting out and you don't understand what hard surface modeling is and what is turbo smooth or smooth modifiers, model a car. Find every tutorial on how to model a car, because that will teach you about the smooth and the topology of the surface and things like that. And use Max or Moto or Blender. These three are like I know Moto is great. I know 3ds Max is great. I hear Blender is great too. But yeah, Max is I would stick to Max, but I know Moto, like, you know how you look at Max and you're like, oh my god, all these tools that Maya doesn't have. Like, that's the way I look at Moto right now. It's like, right, okay. Oh my god, holy moly, how is this even a thing? But they're a little bit more. They're less and less sort of. They're more like Moto's more like hard surface sculpting in a way. You know, it's hard to describe. So it's only
sculpting. That's
in a way. It's just there's so many deformers and scripts and duplicators and stuff like that. It's for very complicated things. So it's like on I would imagine, like, if you're just modeling something basic, it wouldn't matter either way. But like, Moto is a good one to know. But again, Moto is not exactly that popular, so every studio wouldn't have it. So back to this. So yeah, hard surface modeling. Try and model the car. Weapons, normal props, like, you know, radios. Ross is making a MP3 player right now, right?
It's, no, what's it called? The Guardians of the Galaxy Walkman.
These are like great small props, and if you just go on ArtStation and just type in like game props and just look through what people making, you will, again, like, it's impossible for me to explain how it's done over like 10-minute conversation, but it's like, if you want to do hard surface modeling and you want to be in game industry, Google those words and you will find the answers, right?
Just to carry on what Alex is saying there, I'm just going to literally plug Alex here, because this is literally like the main thing that's helped me. So if you're wanting to find the best tutorial possible, this is all my experience, but that's just because I've been taught by the guy himself. So go onto Pluralsight, type in, what's the camera one called?
Just type in Alex Jerjomin camera. No, Alex Jerjomin hard surface fundamentals. That's the one.
And no joke, if you watch this one video series, it'll blow your mind. You'll learn everything, and you'll understand how he works and how efficient he works. Because at the end of the day, it's like, for example, when I've been working on my skill set, it's the efficiency it's like seeing what he does, and then I'm like, wait, you've just taken that polygon away, and I'm like, why? And then he's like, I don't need it, and I'm like, but why? And then I'm learning as I'm watching, as he's going along. I'm spamming him constant messages like, wait, do we not need that edge loop there? And he's like, nope, don't need it. And
I think it's more like while like helping you out a little bit, I kind of like finally understood what hard surface modeling is all about, and it's a giant puzzle of problem solving. Yep. How do you make a curve that is bending inwards, but it still has to be super regular and super perfect, like, you know, and you just find these techniques and ways of doing things. And the more you do it, the more it clicks. You're like, oh, I could do it this way. If I do it this way, it'll be faster. Mm-hmm. And it's like, when Ross was watching me work, he would be like, oh my God, how did you do it that fast? Like, I don't understand. But it's like, reality is, it's like, it's just because the more you do it, and like, every time you model something new, you would find like, oh, if I just only use the cylinder to snap the vertices to or something like that, it's like, that would have made my circles 5 times faster. Mm-hmm. So it's just practice. It's like, just keep practicing and practicing.
So with hard surface, obviously, do you want to move on to organic?
Yeah, so like just to clarify, just to finalize, it should always have something hard surface on your portfolio, because if you, it's the easiest, like it's the easiest one to learn. It's very complicated, but it's actually really easy, and it doesn't require as much art skill as organic does. So, like, this is a great way to start. So definitely have that in your portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
So organic stuff is a little bit more trickier, and that's where ZBrush kicks in. And organic stuff is useful for nature, rocks, things like that, cliffs, trees, and also is useful and is the most important thing for stylized work. So hard surface is great for things that are straight and linear and made in a factory, while organic workflows are great for things that are irregular and handmade, and things like that. So when we're talking about organic workflow, a lot of the times when you apply for a job and say you work in dice or something like that, they wouldn't have as many props that would need organic modeling, because a lot of the things could be made hard surface style wise, right? But doesn't mean you shouldn't know it, because a lot of studios use organic workflows to make stylized art. And the pipeline is almost the same. So you make a hard surface, so you make a block out mesh first, then you throw it into ZBrush and you sculpt over it. And once you finish sculpting it, then you bring it back into 3ds Max. And then the pipeline is the same. You make the low poly, you bake it down. So again, it's rocks, cliffs, and stylized work. And although that's not as important in your first portfolio, it's still a great thing to learn. And you can use ZBrush and you can use these techniques from the organic workflow to complement your hard surface workflow. For instance, if you're making a car and you have leather seats inside, that's actually what I'm doing right now. So a leather seat is not exactly hard surface, because it has folds and it has seams. So that would be like where organics kicks in, and that's a little bit tougher to master. So it's definitely a lot more practice, and it's definitely a lot more work, but again, something you should be familiar with if you want to be an environment artist.
Like, that's the thing when it comes to. So this is the one thing I wish more universities, I guess, had actually like a teacher there. In terms of, I wish most universities had at least one really skilled ZBrush artist. So
they don't pay enough, bro. That's the problem.
well, obviously I'm not an expert when it comes to like how they choose their lectures and stuff and that, but. So once again, I was fortunate enough to have a really good person at ZBrush, so therefore I learned ZBrush. So I had a really good lecturer called Gordon Brown. So he worked at Rockstar, and Gordon taught me the fundamentals of like the basics of sculpting and stuff. And
that's very actually showing, Ross, because like when looking at your portfolio, you can definitely tell that you're like you're far better with ZBrush than a lot of other software, because you do all these like beautiful engravings and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
I'm so obsessed with ornate artwork. I could sculpt ornate artwork if I had to do one job for my whole life, I would just sculpt ornate artwork.
And that means that Gordon probably was the best teacher in your uni, and that's how it went down.
Yeah, it was just. I don't know. It's just always been like I've always liked like, for example, you've probably heard before, but like, so my favorite artists are from like Lord of the Rings, so like John Howe, we got Alan Lee, like these two juggernaut of artists, and I've always been, I like detail, I love shapes and all that, and I think when it comes to like just talking about the topic of ZBrush, I still don't think there's enough people who are maybe using it. I might be wrong. Like, I'm not sure what your thoughts are in terms of like.
There definitely are, because like, so I work in a company that makes sci-fi games, and I know at least a couple guys who wouldn't touch ZBrush like at all, like ever. So if you don't know ZBrush and you want to be an environment artist, doesn't mean you can't get a job. It just means that you might need to look a little bit longer. But yeah, like hard surface pipeline is probably the most like, it's the most popular. And I know like, because we're artists, we want to be different than others and be like, I don't want to do like he does. But reality is like most guys who get jobs are the guys who have a car, a gun, and a camera on their portfolio, and they just get a job because they like kept doing the same things all over and over again, and they just got to a point where they can do it. But yeah, so ZBrush is definitely not not as important for an environment artist.
Something just came to mind when it comes to just the whole topic of portfolio in general. When it comes to ZBrush, what's your thoughts on posting stuff that are purely just ZBrush on ArtStation? Like, say if it's just like a sculpt.
Yeah, so totally cool, and that's kind of like what we were talking about a little bit. It's like, so if you're applying for your first job, it's very important to show your potential studio where you'll be working, that you understand the pipeline. So that's why it's very important to have at least one properly baked prop, or at least one tileably textured and trim sheeted building, right? And at least one object in the game engine and not rendered in V-Ray. As long as you have that one piece that shows that you know how to do this, after that doesn't really matter. And so if you're like sculpting, like for instance, one of my big inspirations, Michael Orb, who works in Blizzard, and that's where, so I get like a lot of sort of art. I kind of like I don't know if he came up with a style, or if it's, well, no, it's not really him, but like it's sort of this Blizzard-esque stylized style. That's kind of where I get my inspiration for my stylized work. And he only has like, ZBrush renders and like some texturing work, but he doesn't really show wireframes. But that's because he's already a senior. He doesn't need to show that he knows the basics, because he's already at the top of the chain, kind of thing.
Right.
So yeah, so it's not important to show ZBrush, but if you made something amazing and you sculpted something amazing and you don't have time, or you can't bake it, why not make a pretty render of it and put it on ArtStation?
So obviously in today's podcast we've covered, like, I know this is a lot to take in. When it comes to, like, there's going to be a lot of stuff that, like, I really hope you're writing this down. Like, if you're listening, this is going to be one of those podcasts that you're going to have to obviously make sure you're taking notes as much as you can, because the reason why I brought Alex back on is because it's allowed us to really go into depth about how things actually work, and like the best sort of go-tos to really help propel you forward. When it comes to the podcast, I guess as a whole, is there anything else you want to maybe touch on, or is that you pretty all good?
I think we covered most of the things that like very important. Yeah, just like so very important. I'm just gonna go back into what I said earlier, and that is like, when you want to work in the industry and you already learned the basics, you have to decide what you're going to be: environment artist in games, character artist in movies, concept artist, rigger, animator, lighting artist, and from that point you have to expand on that specific field, because you will, like, generalists are generally not as required. Like, VFX uses generalists mostly. In the game industry, there's no room for a generalist, because everything's a big pipeline. And in the game industry, you just have to know your part, but you have to be great at it. So it's like, you don't want to be the jack of all trades, but master of none. You want to be a master of one trade, and you have to do it real good. So yeah, so once you know what you're doing, focus on that. Keep crafting that specific skill while understanding the other disciplines, and while understanding the importance of presentation and portfolio work, and you will succeed.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man, for coming on. It's been great having you back on. As always, folks, make sure to leave a like. It'll be much appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe. Obviously, that's the main one. it'll be super dope if you subscribed. It really means a lot. We are growing, and I really thank everyone who's been tuning in. And make sure to select the notification bell if you want to be notified every single week of a new podcast. There's 3 episodes of the Student Art Podcast actually this week, so it's a bit of a crazy week for me this week, but lots of great content coming to you guys. The next guest is actually who's worked on Endgame, so that's another great one to look forward to. So I can't wait, and you know me, Alex, with VFX, I really like it, so it's going to be awesome. But then last but not least, once again, make sure to go check out Alex's work. And like I said, check out his tutorials if you want to really learn about what we've been talking about today, because at the end of the day, it's the workflow, it's the pipeline. So go get it and go chase it. So thanks once again, and we'll see you later. Bye for now.